1 or 2 years, depending on where you look. Now, in 1986, Elton Cheney, I guess, went over to the computer center or somewhere and got somebody to make a printout of, and as I understand it, it's every person who had been employed in the math department from 1923 to 1986, and graduate students and all those people. You're in there, Donnie.
Thank you.
And so in there now it says that Dr. Vickery was here 1 year, 1949 to 1950. Well, you might want to do this sometime. If you go over to the library on the second floor, they have every yearbook since 1923. Interesting to look in those. And now it has him in there 2 years as chair. And Dr. Layton came in 1950, and it just showed him as a faculty member. But that was not what I otherwise heard. So again, I guess that's like a lot of history. It kind of depends on where you look. But now it does say that he was, here's the way it was stated in that he was acting professor and head of department. Now, I'm not sure, was he acting or professor? I guess I should have read professor and acting head of department. I don't know that. Anyway, Dr. Vickery.
Can you spell that? I'm not sure what you're saying.
Vickery.
Vickery?
Vickery. Well, then, in 1950, that's the one I'll go with, Dr. W.I. Layton. I remember him well. And spring of 1968, Sharon and I drove into town. Of course, everything blooming everywhere, boy, so it just felt good. We met Dr. Layton, and he showed us around. I'll tell you some other stories later, but if I have time. But I want to show you, well, Bob Feistel had this, and from the years that he was here, and so I added to it a little bit from the previous years. Actually, yeah, there he is. He was here when I came in, but not as a faculty member. And then he went away and he got back as soon as he could. But here's what it looked like in these early years. Now these are, now not to, they can't read that very well, can you? Not to, I'll see if I can do what Bob showed me here. Maybe focus that a little bit. Now not to slide any, oops, I went wrong. Not to slide any member of the faculty. These are people who were, I guess even in those days, hired on tenure track. And it does not include the people who just came for a year, although some of these just stayed for a year. The James, I can't see them all, can you? The James Shepherd in 1928, he just stayed a year. But there's Dr. Ferguson up there, and he hired a fellow by the name of Robert Shelton, and they both stayed a long time. But you'll notice there's not many places in there where many people were hired. And now again, that doesn't mean that there weren't one or two others that weren't tenure track, kind of like our call faculty and things like that. And then
Shelton is one of the Shelton Gems.
I think that's right. I think that's the one.
He's also a coach.
Right, he coached.
And Matthew.
Yeah, kind of like high school. But I thought that's 1937. And of course, don't remember ever meeting the guy, but Donnie, did you ever know Mr. Pencil? Do you see his first name? Rue, R-U-E. But anyway, in most of those years, there were not but about 3 or 4 faculty members. I guess that means we didn't have many math teachers.
No, I'm at Shelton, I didn't know.
Oh, okay, you didn't know Vincent? Okay. And then RTD, and Carol Bunch, which some of you may know, and then the rest of those, but see, none of those are, on campus anymore. But I guess that's okay. I'll show you another sheet here in a moment, but just some highlights from Dr. Layton. The math department started the math club, a math club in 1959. And I think this was probably Dr. Layton's deal. The East Texas Council of Teachers of Mathematics, which many of you are familiar with, was founded here at SFA. Dr. Layton was the first president, and several of our faculty have been members, and several have been presidents of that, and it's still going on. 1970, Jaime Upslow was begun here at SFA. And were you a charter member of that, or were you gone?
Charter.
Charter member. And Dr. Clark, and charter member, okay. Well, Dr. Clark, who wasn't able to be here today, that makes about 4 of us. Anybody else a charter member?
I was a
Were
charter
you a
student
charter?
president.
That's right, that's right.
The charter's hanging in the office.
Yeah. Anyway, and let's see, that's 38 years, isn't it? And it's still doing well, isn't it? 1971, we initiated the MS degree in mathematics teaching. The university, in 72, the university statistics lab was transferred to the mathematics department under the direction of Dr. J. Yett. And I mean, we had people all over campus come over there, do their statistical work. 1973, the Mathematics Colloquium series began, and been going ever since. It was renamed later, which I'll mention. Well, I'll mention it now. No, I won't hear it. Now, this question had been asked of me, and I found it out. That in 1975, the department name was changed to the Department of Mathematics and Statistics. 1975. Well, now, that's based on, I didn't see a sentence that said that, but I saw the year before it said mathematics, and the next year it said mathematics and statistics. And my logic said, one of the earliest computers we had in here was a Lang computer. And Bob Feistel programmed it, did various things with it. And in the stat lab, they had a bunch of computers in there. And they're antiques, aren't they? Wonder if any of them still around, but boy, they were great things. I always thought it interesting, and maybe you ought to look at these sometime. I guess Dr. Layton started that there was a annual report of the goings-on in the math department. And I had nearly 40 of them. And I found some others in the library. Y'all look at them sometime. That got good information in it. But I remember Dr. Layton several times would say his goal was to have every staff member have a PhD. Well, that never materialized. But it's a lofty goal. But was always encouraging those who didn't have it. You go to school in the summers and take some courses. And several did. They'd go in the summer, some went away to get their PhD, came back, and some left to get theirs and didn't come back. But Don East was one that came back, didn't come. J.E. was one. R.G. Dean was one. Dr. Alexander didn't have his when he came here. He went back and got it. Things like that. So, I guess the other interesting thing about Dr. Layton was, in 1979, Dr. Layton turned 65 years old. And depending on how you want to look at it, the university had a policy at that point that administrators had to retire at 65 from being an administrator. You could go back to teaching. Well, Dr. Layton came from South Carolina, a little town called Newberry, South Carolina. And so he took his Texas teacher retirement and headed to Newberry College and went to work as the head of the math and physics department and did that for many years. So the idea I got from all that was that if we hadn't had that policy, I guess he'd have been chair till he died, or couldn't come up anymore. Which would, I don't remember, let's see, he died in 95, I know that, but I don't know when he had to quit. But after several years down there, he decided he needed to retire from that, so he retired. They couldn't find anybody, so the next year they asked him to come back, and he went back his head. But, yeah, and I'll tell you some more stories about him in a minute, but, well, that gave us opportunity to hire this fellow. And Dr. Atchison. And as most of you know, I've known him all my life. Well, it's, you know, as soon as you can know somebody after you're born. He was the fourth chair, and again, based on how the things worked out, he came in 79, and I guess he went to the dean's office in 89, but we weren't sure he's going to get that position, so we didn't search for a chair, and so when he got that job, we had to have somebody to run this place. And so that's when Dr. Alexander was the interim for 1 year. But just a few things that went on during those 10 years. So I'm told he hired Linda Boozer in 1983. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And, you know, we bought a bunch of computers. Anybody remember the old PET computers? Commodore PET computers. Man, we taught courses using those things, programming in BASIC. And we had two Radio Shack TRS-80s. They had a disc that big. But man, they would work. They would work. Then we bought a bunch of Apple IIe computers. Used all those in some computer labs. I remember taking 6 of those PET computers, hauling them to Humble once a week to teach a course, programming in BASIC. That's great. Yeah. Programming in BASIC. Good stuff.
How long did that go on?
I don't know how long that went on. It was a pretty good while. Pretty good while. But then in 1983, we got to come into this building. In 1989, a student chapter of the MAA course, Dr. Atchison did get to hire several tenure track faculty. And let's see, I guess that's these. This is the other thing that, and you see that Jasper came in 65 and a couple of other fellows. 66, Bill Clark came, and I don't know if any of you know Bobby Boudry or Jane Ritter. Do any of you know Jane Ritter? Yeah. She's still here in town. And then there's Don East in 67. Is that right, Don East, 67? Did you go off the next year? 10.
71.
Okay. And then there was the three of us that came in 68. Then there's Wayne Proctor, Ken Price, Robert Yates. Yeah. Always noticed that. But you see that, although we had lots of other call faculty and things like that, there wasn't much hiring going on in the 70s, early 80s.
There wasn't much hiring going on at any university.
That's what was happening.
The doors were closing in 1970.
Yeah. That's the thing.
Dr. Austin,
Yes.
I remember a story about Jane Ritter.
Okay.
Daniel Daniel, graduate student, played fiddle, excellent fiddle player. My brother played some fiddle, I played some guitar. We decided to get together one day during lunch hour in the conference room. So we got in there and shut the door, we had a good time, made some pretty decent music. Dr. Price joined us. He came in and played my brother's fiddle, I think. And Jane Ritter apparently complained to Dr. Adams about the noise in the lunchroom, in the break room, the conference room. And so Dr. Adams had to tell us in the next faculty meeting, don't be too loud. I don't know exactly
Yes,
how he
that's-
put it, but
That's true.
she didn't apparently appreciate the fiddle in the department.
And so you see some that Dr. Atchison hired there, again, tenure track people. Now, Bob Feistel tells me that he believes he's the last one that didn't have to make a presentation.
I know
Yeah.
I am because I've been on all the presentations since.
Now, I think that must have been something that Jasper did, that he initiated. And,
Actually, there's one
Well, the
missing,
80s,
Charles Lee was hired in 1983.
that's right, I saw that, but I didn't put him on there, sorry about that. Where you are, Charles, sorry about that.
He was here
About
until 6 years,
You are correct. Thank you. Now, I should have made a disclaimer when I started. I do not guarantee the dates. I do not guarantee all this to be correct. Okay.
I don't think I was hired in '85, I was still in high school in '85.
Now, we'll have no more of that.
So you did fail 12th grade.
Yeah.
Would you straighten him out?
You've lied to me.
We best go on.
She's been trying to straighten him out for about 2 years now.
Yeah. Well, then of course our interim did a wonderful job. But usually when you have interims, there's not a whole lot that goes on. It's just making sure everything runs on smoothly. And but Doyle is a fine fellow. Got to see him the other night, and it was good to see him again. But so not much to say except that he kept things running smoothly.
Has anyone tried to walk across campus with that man?
Oh, couldn't do it.
I think I
And he always knew the shortest way across there too. So you didn't go anywhere else. You just went went the way Doyle went and ran. Just,
Clint needs to know how to do that registration.
Oh, wow, what? Yes.
Restoration.
The red line, the red line. Every time we'd have our first meeting, Doyle would get up to explain registration.
Registration.
Restoration, the red line down there. Now Linda didn't like this picture, but it's the only one we had. That's right. And it's still a sad time, but as several of you said, and he would want it the same way, we got to go on. Can't do anything else, we have to go on. But I guess I would have to say, now, I don't, it'll be interesting to watch Debbie over here, to see how she does. I know she's gonna do well. But I don't think you'd find a more dynamic chair. Just don't think you would. I will tell you this story, and, before we get to stories. As I had mentioned sometime before, I think, I was on the committee that recommended Dr. Atchison. Well, there was a fella on the committee who always had to have some from off campus. And, I remember talking with one, and at that time, Jasper applied for the job also. And, this fella said to me privately, he said, "We're not ready for Jasper." I don't know if that influenced anybody. Well, of course, I was the only one that knew it. Well, I don't know if it influenced me because I'd known Dr. Atchison all my life, you know, and I knew what kind of person he was, what kind of mathematician he was. So anyway, but in 1990, I guess we were ready for Jasper. Because lots of things went on. Now, lots of it he didn't necessarily care for, but oops, that's not the page. Did I lose my other page? You can see down in here, lots of hiring went on. And we had to work really hard to get people to come and to stay. Jill stayed a good while, but she's in Alaska now. I don't know where Jay is, but now you can't quite, I might could make it sharpen up some, but there's strikes through some of those, and those are the ones that are not in the department anymore.
Like Florence, some of those left because they didn't feel like they fit in, but at least one of them, we shouldn't be blamed for. This is a PhD in mathematics we're talking about. He came here and after, Dr. Adams hired him for a summer so he could pick up some summer money, he decided after a little bit of competition that he wasn't able to make enough money to raise his family and pay off his school loan. It took him a whole summer to come to that conclusion.
Yeah. And let's see, that white shark? Yeah, white shark. But anyway, some just went on to greener pastures, I guess, and things like that. But those that are still there, it's a pretty good crew. Pretty good crew. And Jasper was in on hiring those people, but that was when he initiated the advisory council. And up to that point, well, just like when I came here, when Bob came here, we just went to see, well, around, and I got a letter saying I was hired. And, which was, as I told you before, that's probably good. I couldn't have competed with you guys. But that's okay. That's okay. We got lots of microcomputers under Jasper's tenure. I remember some of the early ones. He was good at repairing some of them. I wish I had one to demonstrate. But an old Apple IIe, you get to where it wouldn't work right. Actually, he wouldn't raise it quite that high, but he'd lift it up off the table and just let it go, man, it wouldn't work. I have, but not before that. And I guess, one of the other great things was, all the grant money that's come in under his tenure. Now, I know he wasn't responsible for all of it, but he had his hand in all of it. And we're thankful for that. I believe we'll see in a few years ahead the difference that it's making. Well, then, our last one that we have right now, and we don't have a picture, okay? But
Can you go put your face on that?
Real service.
But again, I've had 2 or 3 people, including our president of the university. We would see him out often at Casa Tomas. And of course, again, I've known him 40 years, so he recognizes me, that sort of thing. He would ask me, how's the department doing? And I said, best I can tell, it's running right on smooth. And we're thankful for that. But you do have lots of good help, don't you? Well, I wrote the last thing on this part of it to be continued. And I hope somebody, sometime will, do a better job than I did, but, see what things look like later on. I do want to show you one graph here of, why there had to be so much hiring early on in the 60s and that sort of thing. Now, this graph, is a graph of the students taking mathematics courses in the different years. Of course, what that means is some of them have taken 3 courses and that sort of thing. They got counted 3 times. But it gets down a little bit and then it just, and so you get to have faculty to teach those courses. And so, early on, they're hiring as often as they could. And then it began to settle down a little bit, but, it has some rise in there, little ups and downs. And university administrators, they're always, anything go down, they go to wringing their hands. But somehow we never could quite hit 10,000. 99.45, I believe, was the highest that we ever made. But now I'm going to tell 2 or 3 stories. That's figuratively speaking. And then I'll see if some of you others want to tell some stories. These are true. These are true. I dare anybody to dispute these. I learned some of these just the other night with Dr. Alexander. And since he was here a good while ago, he came here in 1956. And at that time, the math department was in the Birdwell building. Anybody remember the Birdwell building? Yeah, it is now gone on to meet its maker. But if I remember correctly from what I saw, that building was built in 1955. So it was only 1 year old when Dr. Alexander came in there. But he said his office was in the south part of the building and on the North Street side, and he had a big window, and they had an apartment just across the street over there somewhere. I never did ask him exactly where that was, but Betty, that's his wife, could see his office window. And of course, evidently Doyle, he would stay pretty late most of the time. And so she would be watching, you know, and the light would go out, and she'd tell the kid, well, he'll be home for supper in a few minutes. And then he asked me about a desk. So Bob and I went to checking on a desk. But the desk that he had, 1956, in the Birdwell building, he liked it so well, he brought it with him everywhere he went. And we've been pretty fortunate here. We've moved several times, but we got a new building every time, which is good. So in 1968, when I came here, we went into a new building, the science building. And I went near where our old offices were. They remodeled it years ago, but so that's moved on out too. But then in 1974, we came over to the McGee building, and he brought his, you know, most of us, we got new, but he kept his. And then finally over to this building, 1983. Well, when he retired, the desk stayed. And Joe Gotts used it now. And in the drawer, Doyle had laminated a thing that he had written on. Said something to this effect. This desk has served me well for 45 years in Georgia. And that's still in that drawer in Joe Gotts' office. If we're getting new furniture around here, well, that probably won't go. You can't throw that one away.
We can have a museum.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
Some of our old computers and stuff.
I guess-
Girls did.
I guess that's 52 years that desk has been letting people use it. When we were coming into this new building, the talk had been, before we were, the talk had been that they were gonna renovate the chemistry building, and that was gonna be the math building. And they were gonna build a new chemistry building. Well, evidently, now this is just, I don't know if this is true or not, this is just hearsay, you know, won't hold up in court. But that it was, cost less money to renovate science labs than to build new ones. Now, that was the story I heard. Anyway, you can hear anything. So, they changed their mind, they renovated the building that's now the chemistry building, and we got a new building. Well, my good friend, Wayne Boring, who was the chair of the chemistry department at the time, he got his 40-year pin the other day too. And he said, well, I finally figured it out. You guys over there in the math department, you got the elevator and we got the shaft. I knew what it meant.
It was cheaper to renovate that building because they did nothing.
Hey, that'll work.
That'll do.
That'll do it, that's right. But one thing that I asked Doyle about, and they said it was about 1960 that they began to have a Christmas party for the math department. And they always met at their house. And then as years went by, I don't remember what years it happened, that the Clarks and the Bartons and the Adams, they all, the four of them, they would furnish the meat and we brought the rest of it. And we'd have that Christmas party at Doyle and Betty's house. And I guess we did that till he retired. I don't remember what year he quit. I know we have our little deal down here in the department room, but I miss those times of getting together and you know, some play cards, some play dominoes, and that sort of thing. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, the dean, Dr. Gerber, that was the graduate dean. He would be invited, and he'd come, and he and Bob Shepherd would have a pool deal. I don't remember who won every time, but. Now, a few things about Dr. Layton. As I said, we came here and interviewed in 1968, and you just have to know Dr. Layton, that he was an unusual person. But anyway, he was showing us around the department, and he just went to a classroom, opened the door, the class in there. Jasper Adams was teaching the class. He said, I just want you to see what a class looks like in here. I don't know what Jasper did, but anyway. That was not Dr. Layton. I don't know what prompted him to do that. But one Saturday, Dr. Barton went to Dr. Layton's house. Now, I'll give you this picture of Dr. Layton. His house is still over on, it's on Old Lufkin Road, outside the Loop. A little frame house. Maybe got 2 bedrooms, I don't know. But he had one car. If his wife needed the car, she would bring him up to the department and then come back, and all those years they had one car. He probably died with part of the first dollar that he, just a very frugal person, I guess. But they had 2 daughters, and I bet you they're spending some of that money still yet. But anyway, Dr. Barton went out there to ask him some non-serious question, something about the department, shortly after he came here. Well, so he goes to the door, and Mrs. Layton meets him at the door, and she said, have a seat over here, and I'll call, I think she called him Bill, maybe, but anyway, so 5-10 minutes went by, no Dr. Layton. 5-10 more minutes went by, no Dr. Layton. Well, in a minute he came in. He had been outside working. He had come in and taken a shower and put on a suit and coat and tie to meet Dr. Barton, to find out what his question was. Now, folks, there's not anybody like that left nowadays. I mean, most people nowadays, they come in, wipe and sweat. Yeah, what do you want? But he was a gentleman, I'll tell you for sure. And then, now I don't know how Dr. Barton got in on so many of these, but one day he was upset. He was upset about something in the department. I don't remember. But I'm talking to Bill, and Bill and I, neither one of us could figure out or remember what he went to Dr. Layton's house about or what he went to his office about. But he was upset about something this time. So he goes in, and he has all his plans laid out now. He said, I'm going to lay out what I think here, and then when he comes back with his response, then I'm going to lay this on. Okay, those were his plans. So he goes in, and he lays out his first plan. And I'll show you a picture of Dr. Layton here, and another picture in a minute. But that's Dr. Layton. Didn't say a word. But he said, you're doing a fine job, Dr. Barton. I've heard that 100 times. Pat didn't know what to do then. You know how that is. You got things planned, and when things don't work out, then you don't know what to do next. But I guess one of the...
Speaking in terms of Dr. Layton,
Go ahead.
he was a Southern gentleman, there's no doubt about that. We'd have the different socials, and the food would be there. And Dr. Layton had one rule, and he would never touch a bite to eat in the buffet line or whatever until every female in the room had been served. I thought about that night on the Epsom banquet, whenever I pushed Kim out of the way. Anyway,
challenged by somebody, or we challenged them to a donkey baseball game. And so it was at night out at Central Heights. And now, does anybody know how you play donkey baseball? Well, if you're the batter, you're not mounted, okay? You hit the ball if you can, and if it's a good hit, then you mount the donkey, and you try to go around the bases. Well, now that works really well, except the owner of the donkeys is there with a hot shot. Do you know what a hot shot is? Yeah, well, if you don't, go check. I mean, you hit one of those donkeys with that, and it was. Well, somehow, I had a really good donkey, and the owner never came close by. So, and I don't remember what position I was playing, first or second base, I don't know. But there's a lot of times, I had to mount up and go out into the outfield to get the ball, because the guys in the outfield couldn't stay on the donkey. Well, what you had to do was, you would ride to the ball, dismount, get the ball, throw it in, mount back up, you know, that kind of thing. Well, anyway, I don't know if my donkey had a name or not, but I guess one thing, because I can remember as a kid, my brother and I would ride our Cushman motor scooter down to a family that had no children, lived on a ranch, and they had a couple old donkeys. We'd ride their donkeys. Just hit them on the side with the neck with a stick, and go that way. So I don't know if that made any difference or not, but when we finished, walked by Dr. Lake and he said, "Roy, you look like you were born over the lake." I wasn't sure that was a compliment. I took it as such. Well, another interesting thing happened in 1970. There was a thing originated called a flotilla. Dr. Clark, Dr. Alexander, Dr. Dean, Dr. Barton, Mr. Cheney, and Mr. Neal. Their wives all worked. Well, this was the end of the semester. They didn't have anything to do. So they devised this scheme of going on flotilla. Do some boating and fishing and dominoes, I'm sure, a little poker probably. And the number in the group has increased over the years. Where y'all going this year?
Ballpark.
Alvar. How many are going?
15 or 16.
Yeah, see that? I wish Bill were here to tell one story he told me, but I think Pam has a story about the flotilla. You want to tell your story?
Okay, that's actually not a word that I say. Some of you realize that is the F word in this department. The first year I got here, they talk began about this event, and R.G. Dean came and talked to me. He knew that we liked hunting and fishing, and my husband and I got 2 tents for wedding gifts, so, you know, we love that kind of thing. And so he invited me. And those of you who remember Joe Neal, I don't know who he had a conniption fit, you know what that means. That invitation set off this enormous chain reaction of events. Joe Neal just, you know how he got very excited. He was horribly excited. He just, we can have one. So he ran down into Bill Clark's office, shut the door, had a long talk with him. So of course, Bill went into Elton Cheney's office, shut the door, had a long talk with him, because Elton and I were good friends, and so Elton came down to my office and shut the door and had a little talk with me, and he said, you really won't enjoy this, you just really won't enjoy it. He said, Pat Barton goes naked. So.
You didn't lie, you know.
Really? But anyway, so of course I thought, oh, Lordy, I'm not gonna do this. And it was only years later, hearing Pat Barton tell these stories, what he meant by going naked. Have y'all heard this story?
Yes, I
He
have.
and Bill Clark would probably tell this Wink called him on the phone in his office, and there was a student sitting in there, and he was talking about whether they were gonna go to his farm or not. He said, don't worry about it, Wink, we'll just go naked. And I realized by that he meant, you're not prepared before you go. And so they would just go naked. And I didn't realize at the time that that's what he meant, but now that Joe speaks up, now I wonder what.
Well, I have this image in my mind of Pat, I guess I'll tell the story.
Oh, I don't know.
Pat Barton, a hot day. Got hot, went inside his tent, stripped down, and was just laying out in his tent like this, snoring away. Stark naked.
Now, we probably ought to go on. I was sorry that Bill couldn't be here. I hope all of you are praying for him, but, 'cause I'd love for him to. He did leave me 2 or 3 stories, so. Do we have to be through it by now? Well, I didn't hear him say anything, so. Anyway, he says, when I first came to SFA, I did not realize the entire faculty was somewhat intimidated by Dr. Lake, and did not really ask for many supplies, etc. So he said, one day I marched into his office and more or less demanded that we get a copying machine. Now you understand. Oh, it's not either, it's a mimeograph machine. I mean, but boy, wasn't it wonderful. You didn't have to write stuff on the board for a test. Anyway, I remember a story about that. We were over in the, I guess in the science building, and I went down to crank me off some, and Donnie's came in there, and sitting there waiting for me to get through. And he said, you know, I got to thinking, I didn't have anything to worry about, and I got to worrying about that. Donnie. But anyway, he said we had to do everything by hand, so he agreed. He just set right off and bought one. But the rest of them in the department said they couldn't believe I did such a thing as do that. But he said then I began to realize what the culture was around here. He said shortly after I came here, he started teaching a course very elementary. Now he thought it was 127, but I think it's 227. Now you catch that number?
College arithmetic.
College arithmetic. That's what he says. It was nothing but arithmetic. He said, I was appalled we'd teach such a course. So I walked into Dr. Layton's office, told him that the book and the course were awful and we should get rid of it. And again, Dr. Layton smiled. And he said, you're doing a good job. Well, he said, I went to J.E. and told him what I did, and J.E. gasped. Didn't you know Dr. Layton wrote that book? I remember the look. He said, red-faced, I admitted I didn't, and I never said another word about that course. And he said another thing, the faculty was appalled when I addressed Dr. Layton as Bill. Called him by his first name. Said at one time some of the faculty had to share offices. And Joe Neal probably couldn't have been a better situation. Shared an office with and he didn't mention this guy's name, but he said it absolutely horrid body odor. So when he was out of the office, Joe and I, that's Bill, would sneak in, douse his coat, desk, chair, and the side of his office with a strong deodorant. Said it really didn't help me. So we finally got brave enough just to sit down and talk to the guy, and said that pretty much corrected it. Any of you got any other stories you want to tell? I got 1 or 2 more if we have time, and nobody else has any. And I will quit with this one. Yeah. This was a Pioneer Excellent Bed. Have you got any picture about Dr. Layton yet? And he stood up to introduce the speaker. Then he said, but first I need to tell a joke. Never heard Dr. Layton tell a joke before or since. He said a lady came into the studio of a wood painter and asked, will you paint me in the nude? I think that was when Ms. Layton passed.
She was sitting by me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he said the painter thought for a moment and he said, well, yes, ma'am, but where would I put my brushes? Okay. Now I'm gonna show you 3 pictures. If I can find them. First of all, see if you recognize this person. I'll make it bigger. I know Bob Feistel does, because he's already in. Yes, he's still living.
Doyle is.
Doyle Alexander. And that's 1957.
He was his eyes.
The thing that throws you is, he had hair. Okay.
Is he still living?
Who?
Is he still living?
He's still living.
That seems like somewhat questionable, but.
Let me think about that. When Donnie East McCune was clean shaven. That's
Well,
Donnie East.
and a heck of a lot younger.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But Donnie East, we can't figure out who that guy is. Do you remember who that was?
The student?
Was it a student?
Yes.
Okay.
What year was that?
Well, that was 68. That was 1968. Now I've got to get this.
I was a handsome guy.
I think you are.
What happened? This is what happened.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, I should have taken those names off there, shouldn't I? When I had more hair. 1968.
Look at Bobby Green.
Yeah, Bobby Goodrich. And do you recognize this guy right here? That's Dr. Clark. Man, I mean, we were a crew.
Burkhead doesn't look any different than he
No, Mr. Berkey doesn't look a bit different, does he? And there's Joe Lee, well, he's not up there either, is he? Still not. There's Joe Neal. There's Jane Ritter.
What was the name of that show, on TV, the Monsters?
That's it, that's
Uncle
where
Fred
he's from.
Finster? That's
Uncle Fester.
Hey, that's right. But that's
like
Dr.
Nikita
Layton's
Khrushchev.
smile.
Or Nikita.
That's his smile, and then he'd say, you're doing a fine job, Ron.
And I heard that myself, matter of fact.
Yeah.
Jane Ritter and, Jane Shepherd had an office together, didn't they?
Oh, man. There lots of things went on. Sure enough.
Line down the middle of the office.
Yeah, now, I want to tell you one more thing here about my hair. When I was in high school, I had a ducktail. Do you know what a ducktail is? I had a flat top and a ducktail.
At the same time?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you-
Oh, that
And I mean, it was full here, but it was short on top. And, they would call me Elvis. In fact, I got to see Elvis. I got to see Elvis in person one time. Do you know Elvis? Any of you young folks know Elvis? Okay. Anyway. Well, I can't think of anything else to say. But it's in a